I fell in love with these hexagon-shaped solar lights at the Dollar Tree. And I had this candelabra that's been in my stash for quite some time. So I'm going to start out by taking these solar lights, and we are going to remove the top piece of the solar lights. We'll go ahead and save the bottoms for a later craft, and if you don't want to do that, you can just recycle those. Next, I'm just going to pull the lids off here and remove the little sticker tab that's in there. And then I just verify that all of these work because we don't want to start this craft off with a broken solar light. Going back to our candelabra, I wanted to make sure this was a little bit easier to work with, so I'm just going to add it to a 2-inch terracotta pot while we're working on this. Next, I'm grabbing my Fix All glue, and this I do get from Dollar Tree, and we're going to use this glue to glue in place our little lights. And one thing I did find out with this glue and this little candelabra, it was easier for me to apply the glue to 2 of the candelabras at a time, and then I would try to kind of balance putting in the lights at the same time, just so nothing would fall and would be easier for it to stick to that glue. And then I just repeated the same step on the next 2 candle holders. And after about an hour, these were completely dry. I was very happy with how this glue worked. So if you haven't tried that Fix All glue from Dollar Tree, it is a great little glue. And now here is what this looks like added to a bottle. And here it is outside. It's just starting to get dark, and I just love how this turns out. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I think this one is maybe one of my favorite little solar lights to date. So this season, I am doing 3 pepper pot plants, and I am going to separate my peppers into hot, medium, and mild. I'm going to take these fun little chalkboards that I found at the Dollar Tree, and we're going to transform them into some adorable signs for our pepper plants. So I grabbed myself my Apple Barrel Tuscan Teal paint, and I'm going to be using some painter's tape just to tape off the chalkboard, and we're going to paint the frame. And I found by leaving the stand on the back, it was easier for me to hold to paint these frames. And we're just going to repeat that step on all 3 frames. And once we have all of our frames painted, I'm going to go ahead and remove that painter's tape. Now I'm going to flip our sign over, and I'm going to take a screwdriver and remove that little stake on the back. I'll save that piece of wood and the screw for a different craft. Next, I grab my Titebond Quick and Thick glue, and I'm just going to place 2 little dots of glue at the top of my frame. This is where I'm going to start by putting a piece of twine up there at the top. And once I'm satisfied with the placement of the twine, I'm going to grab my staple gun, and I'm just going to staple those into place. Next, I grabbed a lighter, and I'm just going to burn all of those little fuzzy pieces off of our twine. Then all we have left is to trim any of that excess twine, and then repeat this on the other 2 signs. So I ended up making a SVG file, and this SVG file will be available to anybody that signs up for my newsletter. Link is in the description box below. But I did this on Canva, and then I went ahead and imported it into Cricut. And once I did that into Cricut Design Space, I was able to print this. And this is vinyl, and it's permanent vinyl that I'm using for this. And all I'm going to do is for the first sign here, I'm going to say, bring the heat. And this is for the hot peppers, and we're just going to go ahead and center that right in the middle of our sign. And then we'll use our Cricut tools to go ahead and transfer this over. And if you've never used Canva to make SVG files, it is really easy. You can just design whatever you'd like in Canva, and there's a button that you can press for download, and then you download that as an SVG file. And then you're able to import that easily into your Cricut design space so you can make whatever you would like. So for this next piece, it's going to say sweet and sassy, and this is for our mild peppers. So if you don't have a Cricut, these are chalkboards, so you could use chalk or you could also use a paint pen and write whatever you would like on these little signs. And now for our medium peppers, I'm going to be making a sign that says a little sizzle. Now, because these are going to be out in the elements, I did give these a clear coat of Rust-Oleum clear enamel. And once that is complete, here is what our signs look like. We got sweet and sassy, mild peppers, a little sizzle for our medium peppers, and for our hot peppers, we have bring the heat. I just love how these three signs turned out. I can't wait to display these in my garden. Now, here is what they look like outside. For the hooks, I'm using the hooks that I had left over from the Dollar Tree from my solar light video, but you can also buy hooks at the Dollar Tree for these as well. Let me know in the comments below how you would label your peppers. So I've never seen these at the dollar store, but this last week I found these plant watering stakes at the Dollar Tree. So I picked up 2 of them and we're going to go ahead and make these over. I'm going to start out using my Paint for Plastic by Folk Art paint, and this is the color white. We're just going to paint the ball on this watering stake. And to get a good coat on this, I am going to need to do 2 or 3 coats of this white plastic paint. Off camera, I did add a little piece of painter's tape so that I'd have a clean, crisp line on the bottom of the ball. Next, I grabbed a napkin, and this is one that I've had in my stash for some time. I'm just going to go ahead and prep this napkin by taking a piece of painter's tape and removing the back 2 layers from the napkin. I did get this napkin at, I believe it was TJ Maxx actually for this one. Now I'm going to grab a little dish and some water, and using my paintbrush, I'm going to start painting around some of these different blue flowers on our piece. Now I'm going to take my fingers and I'm just going to tear lightly around where the water is on the napkin. And this is going to give us some little like flower petals with a faded edge on it. It's a very rough edge, but we want that on our piece because this is going to help it fade together. And I'm going to do this for about half of this napkin so that I have enough flowers for our piece. And now that we have our napkin pieces prepped, I'm going to go back to that little watering stake and I'm placing it on top of an egg carton. And this is just going to help me stabilize it while I'm putting the Mod Podge on. And this is the outdoor Mod Podge, and I'm just going to do this in little sections. So I'm painting a little bit of Mod Podge, and then while it's still wet, I'm going over the top of the napkin with that Mod Podge. And I'm going to repeat this step until I have covered the whole entire painted area. And this reminds me a little bit like a puzzle, because you're taking each piece and you're trying to find the right spot for it on the ball. And once everything has dried, I did come back with that outdoor Mod Podge and I went ahead and sealed everything in. And once everything has dried, our piece is ready to add to a potted plant. And here is what it looks like inside a planter. I just love how this decorates it. It gives it such a fun feel. You can do anything you would like with different napkins. Here is a fun plastic water stake craft that we are going to make from a water stake from the Dollar Tree. I'm going to be using my Paint for Plastic paints for this, and I'm starting out with my red plastic paint. We're going to go ahead and just paint the whole entire ball. I did end up needing to do 2 or 3 coats of this red paint to get a really good base. Off camera, I did add a little bit of painter's tape down at the bottom just so I'd have a nicer edge. Now, since this watering ball is plastic, there is like a seam that you can barely see underneath the paint, but we're going to use that seam as our line. So I'm going to lay this down onto an egg carton. Now, using my Paint for Plastics black paint, I'm going to go ahead and draw an oval on our piece, and we're going to use that line as our center. Next, we're going to take that same black paint and fill our oval in. And going down about halfway on the ball, I'm going to take that black paint and draw a line right on that center. And if you haven't already guessed, we are painting a little ladybug. So I'm going to take some Q-tips and my sponge brush here. And using my Paint for Plastic in color white, we are going to take the sponge brush and we're going to add some eyes to our ladybug. And I always like to test out the sponge brush on something else before I use it on the piece. Now, while those eyes are drying, I went ahead and I washed my sponge brush and I'm coming back over with my black paint and we're going to add some dots. And these are going to be the spots on our ladybug. Now, to finish the eyes on our ladybug, I did use a Q-tip and I used that to add a black dot to each one of our white eyes. And then I'm going to take a paintbrush and we're going to paint a white smile on our ladybug. Using our black paint, we'll go ahead and add some antennas to our ladybug. And with the back of a brush, I'm going to take a little bit of white paint and add a little sparkle to each eye. And then we'll add a small nose. And then I'm using my Paint for Plastic pink paint, and we're going to give our little ladybug some rosy cheeks. And now that everything has dried, our little ladybug is ready to display out in our garden. She looks amazing. I just love how this ladybug turns out. Such a useful and decorative piece. So while thrifting, I found this candelabra. And what we're going to do is we're going to start out by painting this with some black spray paint. Once that has been painted, I'm going to take 2 solar lights from the Dollar Tree. Now let's go back to the candelabra. I'm going to set this up on a little stand so it's a little bit easier for you guys to see what I'm doing here at home. And I grabbed some of my E6000 glue. We're going to take that glue and just put a bead of it around the candle holder. And if you don't have E6000 at home, you could use super glue instead, but you need to move really fast so it doesn't dry before you can get everything into place. Next, I'm going to take my hot glue and just put that around the base of my light and then add this into the candelabra. And you have to hold it there for a few minutes, but once the hot glue dries, it should hold everything in place. And now we just repeat it on the other side of our candelabra and we are all set. I would let this dry overnight, but then I think it's ready to go outside and hang. I love how this light turns out. While browsing through the Dollar Tree, I found this adorable metal garden sign. Let's transform it into a beautiful piece of art. All we're going to do is remove the string from our piece and place this down onto a paintable surface. Next, I'm going to be using my folk art chalkboard paint, and we're going to be painting a nice coat of paint over the top of our surface. I did do 2 coats of this paint just to make sure it was nice and hardy for the outdoor weather. Now, once that had completely dried, I grabbed my Martha Stewart metallic gilded acrylic craft paint. That is a mouthful. This was the first time I had used this on a project, and I really enjoyed how this covered. I'm doing a nice dry brush over the entire piece, and this gave it a really nice antique look. Almost like you were using Rub and Buff, but without that oily, sticky mess. So I really liked how this just turned out on this piece. And if you'd like to try out this paint, I will put a link for it down in my description box below. And once you're satisfied with how the paint is looking, I go ahead and I let this dry completely, and I flip over my sign, and I'm going to do the exact same thing on the back side. Now, while our piece is drying, I am going to grab one of these plant chains that I found at the Dollar Tree. And this is one of those chains that has 3 strands coming out from it. And all we really need is one of these strands. So I'm going to just take my pliers and I'm going to take off one of these chains. And when I first did this, I took the little hook off. And then after I did that, I decided later on to add that hook back on. So I'll show you here in a moment what this looks like. So we're going to use the hook on one side to attach to our sign. And on the opposite side of this chain, I left the hook open on the end so that we could hook that into our sign. And you'll see that here in a moment. Once we've hooked that into our sign, we're going to then use our pliers and just close that little hook right back up. Now we just take the other side of our chain and we'll be able to use the little clip to attach to the other side of our sign. Now, once we've added our chain, our little sign is ready to display. This was such an easy piece to make with just 2 pieces from the Dollar Tree and a little paint. I feel like this looks way more high-end than it did before when we started with this piece. Let me know how you like this piece down in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this content and would love to see more, hit that subscribe button down below. Thank you. I just love these little garden tool sets from the Dollar Tree. And I am going to take one of these sets and transform it for a beautiful piece for our garden. For our first step, I'm going to take these little garden pieces and I'm going to take them outside and spray paint them white. It did take me 2 coats of spray paint to do the front side of these, and then I repeated the same steps on the back side of these as well. Now, while our pieces are drying, I am going to prep my napkin. I am going to need 2 identical napkins for this piece. To start out to prep them, I'm going to remove the back 2 layers of this napkin, and to assist, I'm using a little piece of painter's tape. And I absolutely love these napkins. I did get them at HomeGoods this spring. So if you're interested, that is where I found them. But you can find very similar ones all over with the blue and white theme. Now that second layer was a little bit tricky to get off of the napkin, but it did come off. And this is really important because you're going to get a lot better hold on your decoupage pieces if you take those back layers off of the napkin. Now let's get out our Mod Podge. For this piece, I am using the Outdoor Mod Podge, and I'm going to be painting the top of this little rake using that Mod Podge. Now, this Mod Podge is a little bit thicker than the normal matte Mod Podge that I use most of the time, but works very well. So after I've done just the top side of this rake, I'm going to just do the tongs of the rake as well, but just on that front side, and you'll see why here in a minute. Now, while that is still wet, we're going to lay our napkin right over the top of the tongs. And before we do anything else, I'm going to grab my cling wrap, and I'm going to take a piece of cling wrap and layer that right on top of the napkin. Then I'm going to smooth out the napkin here. And for this one here, I did start with the tongs, and I just kind of worked my way down through the fold. And once you are satisfied with your napkin placement on here, I'm going to go ahead and pull that cling wrap off. And then we're just going to let that dry, and let's go to our little shovel and start doing that one next. Now we're going to kind of do the same method as we did with the little rake for this one. We're taking our outdoor Mod Podge and we're doing a nice coat over the top part of that shovel. But if you can notice there with the shovel, it kind of has like a triangle going up in the center of the shovel. So we want to make sure when we put the napkin down that once we've done the napkin and the cling wrap, we're going to start in the center around that triangle first and then spread out our cling wrap and smooth the napkin into place. So now we just remove the cling wrap and let this dry. Now let's go back to that little rake. I'm going to start out by just making sure that I have enough napkin there to fold over onto the rake. Once I've done that, I'm going to come back in with that Mod Podge and do a nice coat of Mod Podge. Then we're going to fold over our napkin. And as I'm folding this over, I do make sure that that napkin kind of goes in that crease of the rake. So it just kind of lays there like that. And we're not going to play around with it too much. We're going to grab our cling wrap again, and we're going to smooth everything into place. Then I'm just going to let this dry. Now let's go back to our shovel. I feel like at this point you're kind of getting the gist of what we're doing here, but we're doing the Mod Podge. We're going to fold that napkin over the top, and we're going to start with the triangle, make sure that that is all smoothed. Then we'll remove the cling wrap and let it dry. And now that everything has dried, I'm going to be coming in with my zip sander, and I'm going to carefully sand around the edges to remove the excess napkin. Now this works perfect for the shovel, but when it comes to the rake, I did use the sander on the outside of the rake, but between the tongs, I ended up using a razor blade. I found that that was the easiest for me to use, and it worked out great. Now, if you accidentally sand off a little bit of the paint, don't worry, you can come back in with a fine tip brush and just go ahead and paint a little bit of white chalk paint there to make sure everything is nice and pretty. Now to seal our decoupage in, we're going to be using that outdoor Mod Podge, and we're going to paint a nice coat over the top of the entire top of that rake and shovel. You're able to then just set these in a cup and let them dry for about a half an hour. And now for our final step on sealing these pieces, I did come in with my Rust-Oleum matte clear enamel and did a nice coat over the entire shovel and rake to coat the paint and the Mod Podge. Now for a final touch on these little pieces, I am going to wrap a little bit of twine around the top of the handle, and then I'm just going to use a little bit of hot glue to glue that into place. Then all we need to do is cut off that excess twine, and our two little tools are complete. I just love how these are turning out. I can't wait to add these little tools to a sign. I'm going to be using my Cricut Joy today to just print out some letters that say Garden Lane. And after I cut this out on my vinyl, I wish I would have done a different font, but I ran out of the vinyl, so I had to go with what I had. So to attach my little tools to my wood rounder here, I just stained this with some Waverly Antique Wax. I'm going to be taking some twine, and I cut two pieces that were the same size. And I'm going to just string these little tools in through the hole at the top onto the little wood plank here. And this wood plank I did get at the Dollar Tree. And I've found that recently their wood planks are a little bit thicker than they used to be. So I'm happy that they've changed some of the different things in the crafter square section. Now all I'm doing with this twine is I'm tying a knot, just a basic knot at the top of the piece here. And I want to make sure that it's nice and sturdy. And once I have knots tied into both of them here, I'll cut off a little bit of that smaller piece of excess string. And then I'll take both of these strings and I'm going to tie them together at the top to make my hanger. Now time to add our vinyl. I'll just move the tools out of the way, and then I'm going to take the vinyl and I'm going to try and center it where I would like it on our sign. Then once we have our vinyl transferred into place, I just make sure that the vinyl is down nice on our piece. Now for our final touch, I'm going to add a bow that I made, and this ribbon I did get at the Dollar Tree. It is one of my favorite Dollar Tree ribbons. It's hard to find, but when it comes in, I always snag a few rolls. And we're just going to hot glue that to the top of our rounder. Now this beautiful piece is ready to display in the garden. I just love how this turns out. Let me know down in the comments below how you would display your decoupage tools. This is a thrift flip project. I found this welcome sign in my garage and I made it about 3 or 4 years ago. I haven't used it the last 2 seasons and it definitely needs a remake. So let's go ahead and get started in remaking this sign. So for my first step on this project is I'm going to be removing those metal ribbons that I attached with hot glue. I have since learned that I don't really want to be using hot glue in a very hot spot in the front of my yard. So we are going to use a heat tool here. This is just my heat gun, but you could use a hairdryer as well. And I'm just warming up that hot glue and I'm going to be scraping that away. And I want to show you here how easy it is to remove this hot glue. I'm just going to warm this up and then that ribbon is going to just pull right out. That hot glue just kind of melts in that place. And then I can just go in and scrape that away. Now, once we have as much of that hot glue scraped away that we can scrape off, I am going to come in with a sanding block here. I started out with just a little piece of sandpaper, and then I switched over to my zip sander, which was a lot easier to use, and I just sanded everything down. Then I'm going to be repeating these same steps on the bottom part of my sign, removing everything with the heat tool, scraping off the glue, and then sanding all of that down. Now, once I had taken off the embellishments, I did take the sign outside and I continued to sand around the letters all down the sign and then on the back side of the sign as well. And I'm just roughing everything up, getting off any of the watermarks and making sure that the wood looks nice. Next, I came back in with my Waverly Antique Wax and I'm going to do a nice coat of the wax all over the front and the back side of the sign. I'm going to try to avoid the letters as much as possible, but if I get a little bit of the stain on the outside, I'm not going to worry about it at this time. Then once the stain has dried, I am going to go ahead and bring this back inside my craft room, and I'm going to take my Waverly chalk paint in the color white, and we're going to do a top coat over the top of the letters. I am not going to worry about the sides of the letters. I want that stain on the sides looking like it's rustic and it's going to give a lot of character to the letters. So we're just going to do the top part. Now, once all of our letters have been painted, here is our blank canvas to finish our piece. I just love how it turned out so far. You could just stop right here, but I am going to take this a step further. And while I was outside, I had a little helper join me. This is my puppy, Mocha. She is such a fun little Australian Shepherd. Let me know if I should make her my assistant down in the comments below. Now back in the craft room, I'm going to be grabbing my outdoor Mod Podge, and we're going to be painting a nice coat of Mod Podge over the top of each one of these letters. Then once we have everything painted, we're just going to let that Mod Podge dry. Now while that is drying, I am going to be prepping some napkins here. I ended up using 4 napkins to make this project work, but it would just depend on what size napkins you're using and what part of the print of the napkin you wanted onto your letters. So to do this prep work, I am going to take a little piece of painter's tape and I remove the back 2 layers from this napkin. Next, I'm going to take my napkin and I'm going to position it over the top of my letter. Once I've done this, I'm going to add a piece of parchment paper over the top, and using a hot iron, I'm going to iron the napkin into place. Then I remove my piece of parchment paper, I take my zip sander, and I sand off any of the excess napkin. And if I can't get inside of the letters with the zip sander, I do take a razor blade and I just slice the napkin off. You can also remove the sandpaper off of the zip sander and sand down any edges after you've done that, just to make sure you have a nice smooth edge. Now you're just going to repeat these same steps on the remaining letters. You're going to lay down your napkin, lay down a piece of parchment paper, iron on the napkin, and remove all of the excess napkin. Now, once you have all of your letters complete, I'm going to come back in with my outdoor Mod Podge and do a nice sealing coat over all of our letters. Now, while that is drying, I'm going to prep these 2 little decor pieces I found at the Dollar Tree. All we're going to do here is remove the decorative tassels from these pieces. Once we have those pieces removed, I'm going to place these squares down onto a paintable surface, and using my Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster, I'm going to do a nice light coat over the top of these pieces. And once our paint has dried, I'm going to place one of these squares at the top and at the bottom of our sign. And to attach these pieces, I'm using my Type Bond Quick and Thick glue. And once I've centered my piece, I'm going to let that stay there and dry. I put a heavy book on top of each one of these pieces just so that it wouldn't move around. Now, if you get a little bit of the glue outside of the square, a trick to remove that glue is if you take a paintbrush with a little bit of water on it, you can just remove the glue that way. Now, here is what our beautiful leaner looks like now. I just love how this turns out. I think this turned out absolutely amazing, and I can't wait to display this on my front porch. Now, here is a before and here is an after picture. Let me know what you think about this down in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this content, please consider hitting that like or subscribe button. Thank you. I just love crafting with solar lights, and I want to try a new one here with these 5 little solar lights from the Dollar Tree. So to turn these solar lights on, you do have to remove the little lid on the top there, and there's an on-off switch. And you just go ahead and make sure you turn all of these on and make sure each one of these work before we start our craft. Next, I grabbed some twine, and this twine I did get at Walmart. This is the thicker twine that you can get in a larger roll. It's typically over by the floral section. And what I'm doing here is I'm taking some painter's tape, and I'm just going to go ahead and measure out 18-inch strips but I'm going to keep them all attached. So we're going to make a big long string, and every 18 inches, I'm going to add a little piece of blue painter's tape just to make sure I know where I want to put each one of these lights so they are spaced evenly. And for the ends of my twine, I did do a 24-inch length. That gave me some extra twine to be able to tie this wherever I would like. Now, to make this a little bit easier to maneuver, I am going to remove the lids from all of these little lights because we're going to take those and tie them to our twine. And then the next step is so simple. I'm just going to go ahead and take that twine and tie each one of these pieces to where the blue tape is. So I found that it was easier to remove the blue tape right before I tied my knot, and then I just tied the knot right there. And this is just going to keep everything in place so it'll lay perfectly when we hang this outside. Now, I did find that it was easier to start with the center light first, and then I did the other lights on either side of it after that. And then we're just going to repeat this step till all 5 lights are attached to our twine. Next, we're just going to add the base back to all of our solar lights. And now that our light set is ready to go, I'm going to go hang this outside along my fence line. And I just love how this turns out. It's such a great piece to add to your garden to decorate it. And what I love about these solar lights is they're just a little bit different than some of the other ones. They kind of look like they're floating candles. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I am so excited about this piece. I have recently started growing lavender in my garden, and I really wanted some signage for that. And this is going to be a beautiful decorative piece for that area. So to start out, I'm going to place my wood plaque onto a paintable surface. And I'm going to be using the color Almond Latte, and it's a flat paint from Folk Art. And I'm going to paint both sides of this plaque. Now, once everything has completely dried, I grabbed out my rubber stamps, and I've had these stamps for a very long time. They are from Stampin' Up, and I think they're from like 2002. So I am going to take my terracotta black paint here, and I'm going to just put that down onto a piece of cardboard, and I'm just spreading it out to make it easier for me to use the stamps in the paint. Now I'm going to be stamping the paint onto this plaque, and then once I'm done with each letter, I do wash them off right away so that the paint doesn't stick to the rubber. And this is just a fun, unique way to use your stamps that may not get used very often, and it gives a totally different look to your piece. And I'm going to be spelling out the word Lavender Lane for my little plaque. And now that we have our letters complete, let's go ahead and decorate our sign. I am using some green acrylic paint, and this is a satin finish, and I'm just going to be drawing some green lines on the bottom of my piece here. And these are going to be the stems to my lavender. Next, I'm going to take a little bit of that green paint, and I'm going to put that down onto my little palette here, and I'm going to add a tiny bit of white paint to that. We're just going to lighten that up and do the same thing over again and add a few more strands for our lavender. What I like about just lightening up the first green, it gives a really good contrast to the darker green and the lighter green, but they're still in the same kind of like color wheel because we're using the same paint. Next, I grabbed some flat paint, and this one is Grapevine, and we're going to be using this for our lavender. And to paint the lavender, we're going to be using Q-tips. As you can see, I kind of start at the top where I put just a few little dots of that lavender paint, and then it gets a little bit bigger, and then we go a little bit narrower. Just kind of like how you would imagine a lavender plant to look like. And And then we're just going to keep repeating the same step until we have filled all of our stems up with some beautiful lavender. Now, to give some dimension to our lavender, I'm going to be taking some of the satin parchment paint and I'm going to be adding that to my palette with a little bit of the purple paint that we were using earlier. And I'm just going to mix that together so we have a nice light lavender look. Then using that Q-tip, we're going to add some highlights to all of our lavender strands. Now grabbing that parchment colored paint again, we're going to add that to our palette with a tiny sliver of purple paint, and we're going to mix that together. And this will be our final little highlight to our lavender strands. And we're going to use our Q-tip again, but we're just going to do a really light dry brush in a way with the Q-tip over the top of these lavender pieces. So I just kind of dab that Q-tip onto that cardboard first just to get some of that paint off of there. So it's very faint, that what I'm putting onto my little lavender plants. And this just gives it a really nice light glow. And for some final touches on our lavender plant, I am taking a very fine tipped brush and I'm taking the dark purple paint and I'm just going to add a little bit of a speckle to all of my pieces of lavender. Next, I'm going to take the original green paint we used earlier, and I'm just going to add that to a dry round brush, and I'm just going to add a little bit of grass along the bottom of our piece. And now to frame out our piece, I did grab that terracotta black that I was using earlier, and I'm going to take a round brush again with the dry brush technique, and just do that around the whole entire perimeter of our plaque, just to give it that extra frame that it needed. And now I'm going to flip this sign over and I'm going to do the same thing on the back side. But this time I'm not going to be putting the Lavender Lane. I'm going to be making longer strands of lavender because this sign is going to be hanging in my lavender garden and you're going to see it from both sides. So I wanted both sides to have a beautiful picture. So once we have the first layer of purple, I went back with my lighter purple, and then we're going to add our white highlights. Next, we're going to go ahead and just sprinkle a little bit of that darker purple right over the top, just to give it some little specks. Now we're going to add our grass, and once we have our grass, we'll add our border. And once everything has dried, we're going to go ahead and add our hanger back to our plaque. Now I'm going to take my sign outside with my Rust-Oleum matte clear enamel, and I'm just going to hang it on a hanger so I can spray both sides at the same time and let it dry. Once I've done 3 good coats of this sealer on here, I'm going to take this back inside and we're going to add a few additional items to our piece. So I had a few pieces of leftover lavender floral, and I'm going to go ahead and just trim up this floral using my wire cutters. And I'm taking these pieces and I'm going to make a little swag for the front of my sign. And to attach these pieces, I'm going to be using my floral tape, and you can find this at the Dollar Tree or at Hobby Lobby. And you're just going to wrap that around your piece in the center. Now, once you have your swag made, I did take a little bit of twine and I am going to wrap this around the center of my floral piece. And to make sure that this sticks, I am going to add a little bit of my Tight Bond Quick and Thick glue to make sure that this twine stays in place. Now, once we have our swag in place, I'm going to be using my Super Glue Fix All adhesive that I get at the Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to attach that to my sign. And then I am going to attach a little twine bow to the top just to finish everything off. Now, here is what our sign looks like on both sides. I just love how this turns out. This is such a fun piece, and I cannot wait to hang this in my garden. Let me know what you think about this piece in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this content, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. It really helps my channel grow. Thanks! Get crafty with Lady Red's monthly newsletter. Tips behind the scenes and exclusive giveaways. Subscribe now in the description box below. It's free, so what do you have to lose? Thanks! So I found this sign at the Dollar Tree, and I thought this would be a great piece to make over for the garden. So we're going to start out by just removing the string and the little hooks, and we're going to save those for a little bit later. And on the back side of the sign, we're going to remake it. So we're going to start out by using some Almond Latte flat folk art paint, and I'm just going to take that paint and I'm going to paint the whole back side of our piece. And I wanted to give this more of a marbled look, so I'm going to take two other colors. This one is Crushed Stone from Folk Art Flat, and I'm also going to be using Coconut Milk from Folk Art Flat. I'm just going to add that to my cardboard here, and I'm going to take a sponge, and we're going to sponge this all over our piece. And I just love the look that this sponge gives this piece. It really gives it a really fun look. So you can just keep sponging this until you get the look that you're looking for. Now, once you are satisfied with your piece and everything is dry, I take this outside. I'm using my Rust-Oleum Clear Matte Enamel, and I'm just going to spray down our sign. And this will help protect it from the elements when we have it outside. Now, while that is drying, I had made a little sign on my Cricut, and this was a design already in the Cricut design space. I'd rather be gardening. I then found some gardening gloves in the Cricut design space, and I added them to my piece. I then added some transfer tape. This transfer tape is new to me. I just got it on Amazon a few weeks ago, and I actually really like how it is. It's not too sticky, but it's sticky enough to do the transfer. So I do like this a little bit better than the Cricut transfer tape that I've used in the past. And I'll put a link for it in my description box below if you're interested. So next, we're just going to transfer our design to our sign. And I'm just going to position this right over the top and then lay that down. And then using my Cricut scraping tool, we're going to go ahead and just add that to our piece. So now I'm just going to carefully remove that transfer tape. Now, once this has been removed, I did take this outside again and sealed it with my matte clear enamel. Now, this isn't going to be out in the elements directly. I'm going to have this up against the house. So I'm really hoping that this will last a few summers for me to be able to hang my garden gloves on. Next, I'm just going to add back our little string that we had on there earlier. And I'm just doing this in reverse because we're using the back side of this sign for our new sign. And I did use a little bit of clear tape just to help me feed this string through the holes. Now, once I got everything tied back into place, here is what our beautiful sign looks like. And wow, I just love how this sign turns out. This is what it looks like up at the house with my little gloves on it. And I'm so excited to have a place to put my gloves for when I'm gardening. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And what is your favorite thing to garden? I recently added basil to the front of my tomatoes, and I'm really enjoying that. It's so nice to be able to have basil for fresh pesto. Do you have leftover foam eggs from Easter? Well, you can transform those eggs into some adorable strawberries using some fabric and felt. Let me show you how. Craft starts out with a piece of fabric that's 4.5 by 4.5. It doesn't have to be perfectly square, but approximately that size. And I'm using the really small foam eggs that I got from the Dollar Tree, but I know that they have multiple different sizes, so if you had bigger eggs, you could just use a bigger piece of fabric. Next, all we do is we wrap that fabric up and around the little egg. You want your fabric to be gathered at the bigger side of the egg. So you want the smaller piece where it tapers down to be hanging out as your strawberry, and then we're going to put the leaves around where the rubber band is. And to tie this together, I'm just using a little rubber band that I got from Walmart. Set that aside and grab our green felt, and I'm just going to unroll this, and I have this little wood flower from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to use it as just a little bit of an outline, a stencil, so that I have a way to cut out my leaves. And once I did this a few times, I actually just started freehanding this myself. This was a little bit big for the little strawberries that I had, but if I had a larger egg, I think this would have worked perfect. And for the first few strawberries, I did just kind of cut a hole like I am here by folding the felt in half and then sticking that over the top and hot gluing that onto my strawberry. And that worked okay. But then I ended up cutting a lot of the felt and just doing like one long strip. And that worked a little bit better so I could get more layers on my strawberry. So this tip comes from Brenda from Rustic Lace DIYs. She had a video last year that did strawberries as well, and she showed us this tip with using some of your old picks that you have. And I know we all have them where we save the picks because we cut off all the flowers. And she just cut a piece of the green stem out and used it for her stem. So I thought, oh, this would be great for the strawberry as well. So yeah, thank you, Brenda. She's also linked in my description box below so you guys can check out her strawberry video. We take the pick and we just insert it into the top of the strawberry. And it goes right into the foam nice and easy. Next, we just cut any of the excess fabric out around the top of the rubber band. Now I grab my hot glue and some felt, and we're just going to go ahead and hot glue the felt around the top of the strawberry. And I just fill in more layers where I need them. And now we have our first little strawberry complete. I think this turns out so cute, but I do want to show you another method. So let's try this out. This one I'm going to use some white and polka dotted fabric, and this fabric I did get at Dollar Tree. The last set of fabric I got at Ben Franklin. The main difference with this method is I'm starting out with the stem already in the foam egg. And you can do this with the pick, but for this one I'm using some wire jute twine that I got at Dollar Tree instead for my stem, which I think gives it more of a vine look. And now, once we have all that fabric trimmed, we just go ahead and take our felt and we hot glue that around the top of our strawberry. And here is how this adorable strawberry turns out. I made so many of these. I thought these would be perfect for my tiered tray, and I think that you'll love them as well. Let me know in the comments below what you think you would use these strawberries for to decorate in your house. So I bought this heart sign 2 or 3 years ago for Valentine's Day from Dollar Tree, and I've been slowly trying to use up all of the hearts in different crafts. And so for this one here, I'm taking the last 3 of the hearts and we're going to go ahead and use them in some strawberry crafts. There's a lot of different techniques to remove the paper from these Dollar Tree signs. For me, I've just found it easier to wet them down lightly with a wet towel, and then I just use my Cricut scraper to scrape everything off. Now, you totally don't have to use this sign. You could get some wood cutouts or cardboard cutout hearts and start with one of those instead. When our surface is ready, I'm going to take some painter's tape and I'm just going to add this onto a paintable surface. And I'm using some of my chalk paint by Waverly. I believe this is the lacquer paint. I probably am pronouncing that wrong. I'm sorry if I am, but it's just the red chalk paint that they have. And I did 2 layers of that paint over the top of the heart. Next, I'm going to try this new product out to me, Terrazzo, and it's a sealer, and there's some flakes that you can buy from Folk Art. And I am going to go ahead and take the sealer, and what the directions say to use is you put this on to your product wet, And then once that is on there, you're going to sprinkle your little flakes over the top. And the flakes, they kind of remind me of like eggshell textures, and they're really cute and colorful, but they also can crumble into smaller pieces if you have them in your hand. I'm just going to clean off the excess flakes and let this set aside to dry. Once this is dry, I go ahead and I use the same sealer, and we're going to paint a nice coat over the top of the flakes. And this will seal everything in. This will take about 72 hours to completely cure, but it is dry to the touch in about 30 minutes. While this is drying, I grab another little piece of felt, and we're taking one of the hearts that we haven't used yet, and I'm going to draw the top part of the heart over the top of the felt. But I'm also going to add a little stem in my drawing right in the center of our heart. Now we just cut everything out. And for the bottom, I'm just going to go ahead and cut out little triangles. Now that our heart is dry, I'm going to take some Mod Podge and I'm going to paint that on the top part of my heart. And taking the piece of felt, we'll just go ahead and attach that felt over the top, and this will keep it nice and smooth. And I love how this is turning out for our sign. So I was thinking about it while I was making that little heart, and I decided, you know what? I could make a bunch of strawberries with all of these other wood cutout hearts that I have in my stash. So I did do that. I made another 4 hearts that were smaller, and these were some wood cutouts that I had from the Dollar Tree last year. And so to make all of these cute strawberries, I'm doing the exact same steps that I did for the first set of hearts, but I'm just doing it on a smaller scale. These mini strawberries turned out so cute. Now that we got these mini strawberries made and the strawberry made, let's go ahead and start putting together our sign. And I found this fun wood palette from the Dollar Tree that I'm going to make a reversible sign. So for the first side of the sign, I'm going to take and I painted it with some chalk paint in the color white. And next, after that dried, I took some Mod Podge and I'm just going to go ahead and paint a coat of Mod Podge over the top of the paint. Now let's set that aside to dry and prep our napkin. To prep our napkin, I'm going to go ahead and just unfold it and remove the top layer of the napkin. And if you're wondering where I found this napkin, I found it at Home Goods, and they have a great selection of paper napkins. I'm going to lay this paper napkin over the top of our Mod Podge that is completely dry. Next, I'm going to lay down a piece of parchment paper, and using my iron, I just iron down the napkin to my board. And this iron heats up that Mod Podge so everything sticks very nice. Then I grab my zip sander, or you could use a sanding block, and I'm going to go ahead and sand in a downward motion to remove all of those excess napkins from the board. I want it to seal in the napkin, so what I'm going to do is use some Mod Podge and just paint another coat of Mod Podge over the top of the napkin. That is dry, let's flip our sign over, and we're going to start with the wood side of the sign. So I was using my Cricut earlier, and I cut out a cute little sign saying that says Sweetest Berry in the patch. And we're just going to go ahead and transfer that onto our piece of wood. Now, if you don't have a Cricut, don't worry, you can do something with letters that you can get rub-on transfers from the Dollar Tree. You can also use stickers, or you can paint the words on, or if you decide, you can just add a bunch of strawberries and not even add a saying. So it's completely up to you. The sign is completely customizable, so don't worry if you don't have a Cricut. And I thought that I needed a little bow to go with this sign, so I'm just going to go ahead and just tie a quick little just normal shoelace bow using my twine here. And this white and jute twine I did get from the Dollar Tree last year in the nautical section. And now I just use my hot glue and hot glue everything into place onto the sign. Now let's flip over our sign and complete the next side. So I want to add a messy bow to this side of the sign, and I'm taking 4 different types of ribbon here, and they're each about 4 inches in length, and I'm dovetailing each of them, and there's 3 of each. And I'm using a small piece of pipe cleaner and about a third of the piece of the pipe cleaner. Next, I'm just going to stack my ribbon over the tops of each other. And there's no rhyme or reason on how you do it. It's a messy bow. You can do whatever you'd like. You can make a pattern. You can go in a different pattern. It doesn't matter. And I want to say thank you to all of my current subscribers. Thank you so much for watching. I couldn't do this without you. And if you haven't subscribed yet and are enjoying this content, I encourage you to hit that subscribe button below. Thanks! So now that we have all of our ribbons stacked, I grab my little piece of pipe cleaner and set it down the center and flip over the ribbon, and then I'm going to attach my pipe cleaner on the back side, and I'll flip it around and do it again and make sure that all of these ribbons are completely secured, and then I'll twist that around in the back and then try to hide that as best as I can. Now, I want to cover that pipe cleaner, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut another piece of that red checked ribbon, and I'm just going to go ahead and lay that over the top of the pipe cleaner, and I'm just going to tie that on with a basic knot and dovetail the tails on that ribbon. Now, all we need to do is fluff our bow. Go back to our board. I'm going to go ahead and set the ribbon on the board just to kind of space out where I want to put my stencil. And this is one of the self-adhesive stencils that I got from Amazon, and it's from the fall, and it says welcome to our patch. And I'm going to use my chalk paste in the color Iron Gate, and we're just going to go ahead and use the bottom portion of the stencil. And if you're interested in this stencil, I'll leave a link for it in my description box below. And when I pulled the stencil off, I realized I kind of cut off the top of the E. So I'm just using my chalk paste, and I just fixed that before I went any further. And where the pumpkins were on the stencil, I want to put some cute little strawberries. And so I had mentioned earlier in the video that I did remake a few more of these little mini strawberries. And I did 2 smaller ones and 1 slightly bigger one. Now let's put the finishing touches on our sign. I'm using some hot glue to attach the strawberries and the bow. And now our strawberry-tastic sign is ready to hang. I just love how both sides of this sign turns out. What side do you like better? The welcome to our patch or Sweetest Berry in the patch? Let me know what you think in the comments below. It's a quick and easy strawberry that you can make. Let's start with our heart and some polka dot fabric. Next, we're going to flip over our fabric, and using the heart, we're going to trace 2 hearts on the back side of the fabric. Next, I'm going to cut out my 2 little hearts. Grab our heart and put it on a paintable surface, and I use a piece of painter's tape to keep everything into place. I'm using my Waverly chalk paint in the color white, and we're just going to paint over the top of the heart. Once our paint is completely dry, I grab my Mod Podge in matte, and I'm painting a coat of Mod Podge over the top as well. Next, we're just going to lay that piece of fabric over the top of the heart and smooth everything out. Now repeat that on the other side of your heart. Once everything has completely dried, we're going to use our felt and make a little top for our strawberry. And I'm just taking some Mod Podge, and we're just going to attach the felt over the top of the heart. That's how easy it is. Our cute little strawberry is ready for a tiered tray, or you can attach a string and make this an ornament. As I browsed the Dollar Tree, I found this adorable wood fence, and we're starting with this piece, and I'm putting this on a paintable surface. Fair warning, this does get a little bit messy, so I am going to be using some disposable gloves with my antique wax from Waverly. You've seen my videos before. I've done this technique a few different times. Basically, I'm just taking the Waverly wax and I'm painting over the tops of the wood. Next, I take a baby wipe and I wipe everything clean. Now let's go ahead and grab our Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster, and we'll do a quick dry brush over the top of the whole entire piece. And to be consistent, I also did a dry brush over the back side of the piece as well. Let's set that aside to dry. While that's drying, let's grab our little heart and place it on a paintable surface. And using some Waverly chalk paint in the color red, I'm just going to go ahead and paint our little heart. Now, once that paint is completely dry, I'm going to use this reusable stencil that I have from Amazon. It doesn't matter that it's from the fall because we're just going to use the Welcome to the Patch portion of the stencil. Grab my redesigned chalk paste in the color Vintage Lace, and we're going to go ahead and just use that paint for the stencil. Once I remove the stencil, I want to let this dry completely. I'm really liking this new terrazzo sealer, so we're going to use this again on this project. I'm going to just paint over the whole entire heart using the terrazzo sealer. And while it is still wet, we're going to sprinkle over the terrazzo flakes around the words of the welcome to our patch. I think these flakes give it more of that strawberry look, but if you don't have these flakes, you could just paint some little dots instead for your strawberries, or you could just leave it red. Once everything is nice and dry, we're going to grab the sealer again and paint a nice coat over the top. And this will be dry to the touch in about 30 minutes, but the bottle does say that you need to wait 72 hours for it to completely cure. Once this is completely dry, I'm going to take my little felt top, and using some Mod Podge, we're just going to attach that to the top of this little strawberry. Let's put this cute sign together. I'm going to hot glue this little berry onto our little fence post, and I like to put the hot glue directly on the fence post here, so that way there's no hot glue dripping from the back side on accident. And once that's secure, I'm just going to add a little bit of hot glue to the top of our strawberry, and we will put a cute jute bow right on top. And that is our simple little welcome to our patch sign. This will be so cute as a door hanger or hanging on a tiered tray. For this craft, we're starting out with a solar light stake, a small piece of scrap wood, and a water bottle cap. Next, we're going to take this little piece of scrap wood. I'm just putting it down onto a paintable surface, and I'm going to give it a quick coat of Waverly chalk paint in the color white. And once everything is dry, I'm taking my Martha Stewart little stencil here. And I really like these stencils. They're self-adhesive. They are not like the silkscreen ones where you have like that little bit of a silkscreen in between everything. It is more like a traditional stencil. I'm taking some of these acrylic paints that I have from Folk Art. One is Grapevine, and then the other one is Green Thicket. And we're just going to go ahead and put one of these little flowers on here and stencil that on. And I'm using some stencil brushes that I have from Plaid. What I've found when stenciling using stenciling brushes is if you just kind of tap down as you go and don't repeat where you're going to be at, it really works really well, and I get less bleeding that way. Next, I'm just going to go ahead and pull this off, and we're going to see this beautiful flower. Now, I'm going to grab one of my silk screens, and I've used this one many times. It is a fall silk screen, but I like the welcome to the patch. So we're just going to add the welcome to the patch words to this piece. And with my silk screens, I tend to use chalk paste. This is Chalk Redesign, and it's Iron Gate. And I get this on Amazon, and I have had this stencil from Amazon as well. And I've used it for 3 seasons, and it has been great. I've used it in the spring, in the fall. I just love reusing these silk screens in different ways and different pieces. So when I'm using the chalk paste, I just apply this with a squeegee, and then I'm just going to pull that paint over the top of our piece. Next, we'll go ahead and remove this little stencil here, and our words will appear and it'll look amazing. Now, once this paint has dried, we are going to stencil on the back side because we're going to make this a two-sided sign. I'm going to take that same stencil set from Martha Stewart, and I'm using the one that looks like a sunflower. And we're going to make this side look more for the fall, so that way we can just flip this sign around when we want to. And for the paint colors, I'm using Moon Yellow from Folk Art. I'm using Real Brown and Green Thicket. And we're going to continue using those stenciling brushes. I did start out by doing the center of the flower first, and then I'm going to go ahead and do the yellow on the flower petals and the green stems last. And I kind of work from the center out, and I feel like this is a good way to keep your stencils from bleeding together. And now we just remove our stencil, and as soon as that has dried, I'm going to grab another silk screen. I did also get this one on Amazon, and we are going to apply this to our piece. Once that is there, we're going to grab our chalk paste again, and this is from Redesign in the color Iron Gate, and I'll put links for these all in my description box below if you're interested. And we'll use our squeegee, and we'll go ahead and squeegee that chalk paste right over the top of our silk screen, and then we'll pull the silk screen off and we'll see our beautiful design. Now, once everything has dried, here is what our sign looks like on either side. Now, you could stop here, add this to your tray, and you have a cute little piece. But this is going to be outdoor decor using those solar stakes because we want to use all of our materials that we use from crafting. So to attach this to the solar stake, since this is a little bit heavier of a piece, I did do a little pilot hole that I drilled into the piece of wood. And you could, if you don't want to use a power tool, you could just take a nail and a hammer and just kind of hammer a little hole in there just to get something started. Then I'm going to drill a hole into my water bottle cap. This will make it so much easier for me to attach with a screw to the piece. Next, I just take a screw and I'm going to go ahead and screw that little water bottle cap into my piece of wood. Next, we're going to be taking this plastic bonder. I tried 3 other glues before I ended up settling on this. And part of my problem with the other glues that I tried E6000, Fix All, and Super Glue. And while they worked, because of the weight of this piece of the wood on the top, I really needed something with a stronger bond. So we're going to use this plastic bonder here, and if you've never used one before, it has 2 tubes on it, and you just kind of press it down onto a disposable surface of any sort. So I'm using a paper plate for this, and then I'm just going to cap that off right away. And I'm taking a popsicle stick here, and I'm just going to mix those 2 items together. And you have a few minutes to be able to apply this, so you want to apply this fairly quickly. It does harden within 6 minutes, and it's completely cured within 30. So it's a very quick glue to use, but it works amazing for the plastic. So I'm going to take this plastic bonder here, and I'm going to add it to my bottle cap. And once that is completely coated on the inside of that bottle cap, I'm going to add my little stake to the top. And then I'm going to hold it there for a minute and just let it sit till it hardens. And once that has dried, we're going to go ahead and I'll add the bottom part of our stake to our piece. And now our little sign is ready to display in the garden. I just love how this 2-sided sign turns out. This is such a great way to upcycle your solar stake, a little bottle cap, and a piece of scrap wood for some beautiful decor. If you're enjoying this content, please drop a sunflower down below in the comments. Thanks!